Welcome everyone to our second session on healthy marriages. And for today, we have a special guest, my wife, Maliha. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, which I think most of us don't know what that is. But that's kind of an area of psychology in which you specialize on human relationships and family systems. And so she completed her bachelor's degree in psychology, and then she completed her master's in that program, marriage and family therapy, and she's been working as a therapist for more than a decade. And so she brings a lot of experience, a lot of ideas that some of which is faith-based, but also a lot which is based on the science and based on experience. And so we wanted to introduce that and make that a perfect match for what we learned last month with Dr. Tariq about establishing a connection within a marriage. Today we're going to switch gears a little bit and focus more on communication. That once you have that connection established, how is it that you keep things going and avoid patterns of unhealthy communication? So with that said, we'd like to invite Maliha. She's going to present a little bit, and then we're going to open up questions. Most of today's program is going to be responding to those questions. I know we have a lot of people online, so start thinking about the questions that you want to ask, and you can start posting them now, and we'll take them once we get to the Q&A session. Jazakallah.
All right, thank you everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. So inshallah, we'll talk about communication today, and it's really, communication is part of building connection, right? So how do you build that connection? You have to talk about it, you have to communicate it, voice it, and not only just like, what it is verbally, but also nonverbal, right? Because that also builds a connection within the relationship. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different. Usually, you guys get to ask the questions, but today I'll be asking questions, and hopefully you'll all have responses. You can certainly post your responses online. For those of us who are here in person, feel free to raise your hand or shout it out. It's okay, we're a small group here. So we'll start from there. So one of the things I wanted to start with is, we all know the basics of communication and what communication is, right? And the types of communication that we have. But what I wanted to hear from everyone here, as well as from online, is what influences communication. So if you have a response, you can post it online, or you can share it over here for those of us who are here. And I'll start actually writing them down. Any takers that are here? There's no, it's not a test.
How does communication relate to marriage?
We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Anyone with a response to what influences communication? He wanted to make sure that I was covered. One-on-one time, okay. Okay, so time. Okay, what else? Any other responses?
Sometimes a reaction initiates communication.
Reaction, okay, yeah. What else? Think more broadly, what do we think influences communication? Yep. Childhood, yeah. Experiences, right? What else? Sorry, my handwriting's terrible on whiteboards, guys, so. Anyone know? Having audience, okay. Yeah, so your environment, right? What else? Message. Yeah, something to say. Okay. So yes, these are all right answers. Sorry, go ahead.
Ability to decipher issues.
Okay. Okay. Understanding. Upbringing, okay.
Confidence in expressing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Culture.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, for every action, there is a reaction. Okay. All right, great. Yes. So, these are all right answers. This one right here was one of the main answers that I was looking for, culture. Your environment, right? Like where you are, the context of the situation that you're in, what you're experiencing in the moment. Those are all things that are ways or forms that we communicate, and they influence them heavily. Because like when we're talking to someone, our brains are literally like, processing all of this information, where we are, what we're feeling, how we're feeling, what that person like, made us feel like. So all these things get combined and they give us the reaction or the response to that given situation. So it's a lot of stuff, right? Like, who's thinking about their childhood when they're in the middle of like a conversation with their partner, right? But this plays a huge role, right? How you felt when someone was talking to you as a kid, when you were being brought up, that experience of someone giving you attention, that experience of like someone nurturing you or guiding you or helping you or making you feel a certain type of way, whether it was good or bad, right? These are all things that get recorded over time in our brains. And then this is what makes us communicate the way that we do with other people around us in any given situation. So this is a lot of information to remember or to think of in the moment, but technically we're doing all of this all at once. So great job. Stickers for everyone online as well as everyone here. You'll all get your stickers, don't worry. And then I think one of the things we have to think about is like, the previous generations and how they've impacted the way we respond today, right? I think that's a really big part of our experience as individuals, because not only does like our culture play a role in how we respond to to our partners or to our spouses, but our previous generations and how they responded to their partners and their spouses, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes on that our brain just processes or understands, but doesn't necessarily, is on a conscious level thinking about it. So that's something really good to kind of keep in our back pocket for later on when we talk a little bit more. So what is communication made up of? Outside of this is the influencing part, right? So what is it made of? The ingredients. Any takers? Listening, okay. What kind of listening? Ah, good job. Active listening. Yeah. There you go. All right, we're going to get back to this active listening. What else? What are some other ingredients to communication? Fighting? Resolving conflict. There we go. That's a nice packaging right there. Okay, what else? Okay, but what about speaking? Like how, like speaking what? No. So what matters when we talk to someone? Like what, let's say, I'll give you guys an example. We are having a nice conversation about, how nice the weather's been. How are we going to talk about it? What, like, with excitement or with like, the weather's been okay? Or like, oh, have you seen how nice the weather's been lately? It's been so nice to go outside finally and be able to walk and not feel like you're going to melt. What's that? Tone. It matters. All right, what else? Body language. Yes, you get double, triple stars. What else? Eye contact, yep, that falls under body language, yep. Very good, good advice. Eye contact in marriage is important. What else? Mood, yeah, yeah. Because that impacts your tone, your body language, right? Your active listening skills. What else? Behavior, okay. What else? Anything else? Anyone else? No. All right. So the major ones here were tone and body language, right? The way we talk to someone about anything, whether it's like how nice the weather is outside or what we're thinking or feeling in the moment, matters in in our speech, right? Whether we are excited and like, oh my God, have you seen the weather lately? It's been like crazy, I can't believe it. Or, hey, it's such a nice day outside, let's go for a walk. There's such a difference in that connection that tone matters. And it helps the other person know what it is that you're trying to tell them, right? Body language matters, right? So like when you're looking at someone and making eye contact with them, they feel acknowledged, right? They feel like they exist, right? They're there, you get it, you're acknowledging their presence. When you don't look at them, or you look away from them, or you're on your phone and talking to them, you don't exist to them. You're not important, right? So how you like position yourself to your partner makes a difference. Because a lot of times, and we're all guilty of it in one way or another, where we're multitasking. I can be on my phone and I can be talking to you and I'm still paying attention, I still got all the information, sure. But what your partner is seeing is that you're too busy to put your phone down, to turn to me and say, oh, okay, like I see what you're saying, right? They feel like you don't care. And that's us communicating in our nonverbal ways that we don't have time for them. That whatever we're texting, that email that we're sending, or that thing that we're looking at online or on the TV is far more important than their existence, right? And it doesn't take long, right? For us to just like pause, look at our person, be like, I see you, right? Tell me about your day, or tell me about what's going on. Or let's talk about, the weather, whatever the case may be. So that's important. And that plays a role in active listening, right? Active listening is not a workout, right? It's not you running, jogging, and listening. Active listening is you being able to understand what your partner is saying and then repeating it back to them. So you can make sure that you've heard them and that they can make sure that you've heard them correctly, right? A lot of us, we're very guilty of this, where we're like, yeah, I got what you're saying, I got it. You want like what, eggs or milk or bread or whatever from the store? Yeah, I got it. And then we don't necessarily like look at them and be like, oh, so what you're trying to tell me is that you'd like me to go to the store and pick up eggs, bread, yada, yada, yada for the dinner tomorrow night, right? Which makes a person be like, yes, that's exactly what I want. Thank you, So active listening is about repeating or summarizing what your person's saying to you, and then being able to let them know that you heard them and that you heard them correctly. And if you didn't, they provide you with the clarification that you might need. So active listening is very important in all parts of our life, right? Like we do it at work, right? When we're talking to our supervisors, our teams, we do it when we're in trouble, if we did something wrong and we have to go and listen and figure out what we need to do next. But active listening is something that most couples will not focus on when it comes to their own partner, because there's this autopilot of I know my person, I know my spouse like the back of my hand. Well, maybe there's something new on the back of your hand and you just haven't noticed. So it's important to really allow yourself to slow down, pause, look at your person and say, hey, so what I'm hearing from you is that you want X, Y, and Z. So these were all good examples, guys. Thank you. All right. So what's next? So we learned a little bit about who or where we learn our communication from, right? We learn it from our parents, our previous generations. We see it across the board in how things are, right? We certainly see it in our experiences with people that we get to know. We see it in, the moment that we're having, whether it's having a good day or a bad day, or we see it when it comes to, we experience communication in different ways. But what I want to know from everybody here, as well as everyone online, is when you were growing up, what memories can you think of where you actually remember like seeing an exchange of conversation between your parents? And how was it? Like, was it a good one? Was it a not so good one? And you don't have to go into detail, but just think back to like your childhood and think back to an experience that you had with, an interaction that you saw, your parents exchanging, that you can still remember. And how did it make you feel in that moment? So we'll take like 2 seconds and think about that. And then if anyone wants to kind of like share a feeling, you certainly can. All right, anyone think of a experience that they've had or they remember that they want to share? And you could share it in the form of a feeling, you don't have to go into detail. Any takers online? Yes, go ahead. So how would you describe that memory? Was that like a good experience?
It's funny. It's
Yeah.
sometimes the recipe gets sometimes it exceeded good, sometimes it's
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And that brought, for you in this moment, it brought like a happiness, right? It made you smile. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? So the reason I asked everyone to do this is because I wanted to make the point that, throughout our life, we learn these things, right? Like we watch our parents do certain things or respond in certain ways. And these memories, they literally get imprinted on our brain, right? And then as we grow and we have our experiences and we expand in life, we'll find ourselves maybe almost like, reliving the same experience as they are, right? And we might catch ourselves being the way that they are. Or, and saying, oh, my dad used to do that, or, oh, my mom used to do the exact same thing where she would kick my dad out of the, kitchen, or whatever the case may be. And the reason I wanted everyone to think about that is because these are the things, again, that influence or guide us throughout our life in terms of how we connect with the people around us, right? So when it comes to even like those negative experiences that we might have like experienced where we might have seen our parents argue or have a disagreement, or we may have never seen our parents argue or have disagreements, and we just felt like everything was great. Well, in reality, those things weren't always true, right? But we were picking up on these cues throughout our life, and we were just storing them in our brain. And when we do that, we feel like this is it. This is how to communicate. This is how to move forward. But is it really? Can those things be changed? Can how we perceive the world around us or how we connect with the people around us in terms of communication, can we change it if we want to change it? And the answer is yes, right? You certainly can. You can go back and you can say to yourself, maybe there's a negative habit of us communicating in the wrong way and we want to make it better, right? How do we do that? Right? What do we ask ourselves? Where do we work on ourselves to like improve that? And that, building that awareness goes a long way. And in communication, awareness is very important because the more aware you are of yourself in terms of how you're responding to a situation, the more likely it is that you will be able to correct yourself if you were to make a mistake, right? Because we are human, we're gonna make mistakes. So remembering that yes, our past influences us in our present moment, but it doesn't mean that it's permanent, right? It doesn't mean this is it, this is who I am, I'll never be anything different. It just means that in this moment, I recognize this about myself. I'm being aware of how I'm responding. And if it's something that is not working for me or my partner or for my family, then it's certainly something I can change. So being open to that is what we want to talk more about here. But I'm going to pause here and I'm going to kind of open it up to any questions if they've come through and kind of hit on those and then move forward. Sure.
My parents, I remember just now that my dad, he was a bureaucrat. The state had the state regimes, but and there were servants also in our house. But he used to come from his job and he used to every day wash his undergarments, handkerchiefs, so that made easy for wife. So that I remember this time. I'm like that generation. All of these are we siblings. They are though the income was not those days so much, but everyone, all of our siblings, they went to the missionary schools to convent school. So that every day he was so pious and sincere and honest person that, and also a talented person that I remember this time.
And what a beautiful memory that is, right? And how much, like, just think about how much that communicates to you about not only who he was, but what you learned from that experience.
And one thing I learned that he used to tell us that if you go to school, if you go to college, if you go to job, be on time, before time. That will make your position dominant in the, and that is still I'm doing the same at this stage of age.
Yeah, Marshall. Yeah. So see, there's like so many positive things that can stay with us that helps us to like grow, right? And build our personalities, right? Build who we are as individuals. So excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
So we have an anonymous question here online, which is a reminder to everyone they can send questions in that form. What if you only receive a negative comment or criticism? How do you turn that around? I think this is a great question to start with.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say think about why it hurts so much, right? Why is it that another person's words are carrying so much weight for you? And when you kind of like dive into that and you start dissecting that a little bit, you have to ask yourself, well, do I really believe this person? Or do I really believe that this is who I am, right? And if you get the answer like, no, maybe this person doesn't know who I am. Maybe they just said it out of like anger or frustration or whatever the case may be. Then we can find a way that way to move forward by saying, it's not true. It's their opinion, right? It's what they think of who I am. But I know that I'm not this person because I've built a relationship with myself enough, right, to be self-aware, to know that these are not the qualities that I hold true to myself. And maybe this person, for whatever reason, said the things that they did. So that's the connection I want to make here, is that throughout these experiences that we have in life, the constant thing that remains is who we are, like our individual self. So when we start building a relationship with ourselves, we learn so much about ourselves, and we learn who we are and why we are the way we are, right? And when you do that, you communicate more positive things to yourself. You don't look at yourself in a negative way. Or you can understand that, like, they're critical, that's their thing, their opinion, I'm good with that. Like, I don't need to worry about who they think I am, because alhamdulillah, I know that I've worked on myself enough to know that I'm not this person. So that's how you turn it around.
From Dr. Qaisar Sufi, so he says professional women are also taking care of small children, also doing housework like cooking, driving, and grocery. What is the best way of managing this situation? We get this question a lot, actually.
Well, help one another out, right? A family is not consistent of one person. It's two people who made that family, right? And both people can work together to help one another out in managing all of those tasks. So if, both parties are looking to work and can have a life outside of home and still need to play their role at home, there's like the cultural way of looking at things where it's like gender roles and all of that. But if we just take all of that and put it aside and just look at it from a more compassionate or empathetic way and say, just as I've worked 40 hours today or this week, so has she, right? So I need to be able to step up and help her manage the household stuff because this is both of our responsibilities. It's not just one person's. So divide and conquer.
Can I add a footnote question? So I get this all the time. You know, and as imams, people come to us and ask for our insight, and of course we're not professional therapists, but we give pastoral counseling. And usually my first question is, have the two of you spoken about what your expectations are? And I found that 99% of the time, the couples have never even talked about, you know, dividing things up. So that's usually the root problem. What have you encountered in your experience?
I think the same. You know, a lot of time that's communication, right? When you don't talk about expectations or when you don't talk about how we'll proceed, you know, when you start a family or what's expected of one another, then it's kind of like, you know, just kind of like finding your way in the dark, right? Because you're not really sure. For couples, I always encourage, if I'm doing like premarital counseling, I always talk about, well, what have you talked about so far, right? We'll go through a list. Finances, children, 5-year plan, whatever, you know. We'll talk about, well, what within that have you talked about, you know? And everyone comes in with a golden answer, right? Everyone has the textbook answers for you. But I also remind them that they have to be very realistic because life will throw you curveballs, and therefore you're not always going to be able to do exactly what you said, you know, in this moment. But be flexible with one another, but have that open communication so that you trust one another to have like better conversations and to have more transparent conversations.
The next question, how can we reduce the divorce rate of Muslim couples, which is increasing a lot in the USA? Since I'm a statistics person. You know, I watch these numbers, and contrary to popular opinion, the divorce rate in America has been dropping for almost a decade, even though it was increasing for a long time. Of course, that's because fewer people are getting married, but the divorce rate among Muslim Americans is continuing to increase, and it hasn't dropped. Is it that Muslims are worse at marriage? What's going on?
I think we have higher expectations, right, when we go into this idea of marriage. Most couples that I talk to who I do premarital counseling for that are Muslim, I'll learn that, you know, they've never talked about anything like real, right, except like planning the wedding, which is real. But like they didn't talk about themselves, right? They didn't talk about their plans. They didn't talk about what they had hoped for, right? Like what's on their wish list for life, or what their expectations are. And so when you don't talk about those when you don't have those real conversations early on, when you don't get to know your person real early on, you're gonna find that your marriage is gonna fail within the first year, because it's all unicorns and butterflies until someone doesn't like what you're wearing or how you left your socks on the, you know, sofa, or like you didn't put the toilet seat down, or whatever the case may be. So talk, right? Let each other know who you are. Like, and I think the more open and focused as parents we are on allowing or having these open spaces for conversation about marriage and the expectations of marriage, we'll see that decline in divorce, right? Because for most of us, it's like, oh, boy meets girl, boy, girl like each other, alhamdulillah, you know, let's get married. Like, throw this like lavish party, call it a day. But nobody talks about like, well, what do you expect is gonna happen like 1 month after the honeymoon? Or what are you gonna expect is gonna happen 5 months or 6 months? Because life's gonna throw you those curveballs and you're gonna have to be ready, right? We don't have those spaces within even our own family systems, right? To have these conversations where you can talk to your parents about it. They're like, "Beta, I'm too busy planning your wedding, okay? Like, just figure out your 10 outfits that you need, okay? Let me get that done, and everything else will be just fine." But rather, that's actually the time, that's not just the only time that parents should be talking to their kids about this. I feel that parents should be talking to their kids about marriage from very early on, right? Like, as they're growing up, as they're becoming mature, have these conversations about the connection between men and women, right? Have these conversations about, well, what would you like, right? What kind of a life are you hoping for as you get older? Talk about, how do you connect with a person who's getting on your nerves, right? Like who you don't like in the moment. Talk about like what you can do when you're feeling upset and you don't know what to do, right? Rather than getting angry and lashing out, how do you help your children become more, feeling more comfortable with themselves and expressing themselves in different ways? So this conversation needs to start like very early, not just like 6 months before the marriage, and certainly not 6 months after the marriage when the couple's having problems. But it needs to be almost like preventative care, right? Like where you start very early and you hope that like your child is like gaining that awareness. And second, role models. Be the role model for your child, right? Be those people that you want your children to be in their lives, in their relationships. That's a form of communication, right? They see you all their life. They've seen you since they were born. So they see the interactions between their parents. They remember memories and experiences, right, of how their parents were with one another. So if you want your children to have a healthy marriage, you have to have a healthy marriage because you're the biggest role models for them. You're the biggest like influencers, right? Not the people on TikTok, not the people on Instagram. The people who are really influencing, our children are us. So we need to have like healthier communication and connections and, like have more capacity to deal with difficult situations. And that helps us to prevent, hopefully, down the line, the, divorces within the marriage.
I have a question about premarital counseling. We offer it here at ICCP, and we try to make it almost a requirement by letting them know when they register the marriage that this is something we offer. It's available either through the imams or we can refer them to our outside network of professionals. But the vast majority of people decline it. And my impression is that they want to present themselves in the best possible light. And they're worried that having the premarital process is going to expose their flaws, and they don't want to be real, for lack of a better word. They don't want to display that authenticity before marriage. They're like, we can save that for after. Do you think that that's part of why we have the divorce rate we do among Muslims, is that the adjustment period is after the marriage instead of before the wedding?
Definitely. I think that we need to be able to be our real selves before we marry someone, right? Like it's like we're putting up a false, sense of self just to show that person that, oh, I meet all of your requirements, right? Or you meet all of my requirements. You're checking out all of the boxes. But that in reality, tomorrow or 2 days after the marriage, if something comes up and you guys are in a fight, that's like, oh, you're a terrible human being. Like, I'm done with you and you're off. So premarital counseling does allow that, will to come down and be like, this is the real me, right? These are my hopes or my ideas or my thoughts on this topic or situation. And it brings out, it opens up the space to have like more transparent conversations that are needed. There are a lot of other, I guess, like, churches and synagogues that make it a requirement for, them to do premarital counseling, or like the rabbi or the priest won't perform the marriage. Some even have like a program for 6 months, right? So 6 months of going to our priest and sitting there, and they have like workbooks, and they're intense. I think they're more intense than the work I've done, like as a therapist. So, but it's good because it's faith-based. It's very, allows the person to really get to know their partner and see if this partner meets what it is that they're hoping for within the marriage. And, as Muslims, I think we should certainly have something of that sort, because I think it would be helpful.
So Imam Rifai reminded me of something when he was talking about a lot of the people that come to him. One of the things I've experienced since doing this is a lot of people have intimacy problems. I'm trying to think if it's by age. I would say probably, ironically, I think more of the younger couples this is just my experience. More of the younger couples that have come to me after many conversations, it turns out there's an intimacy issue. Of course, it never presents as an intimacy issue. It presents like he's stingy, she's stingy, he gets me, he does something else. And I'm like, well, this is too broad. And then I dig, and then it's like, an intimacy problem. So I'd love you to shed light on that, your experience, advice for us, how to deal with that if and when it comes up.
Sure. So I think, for me as a clinician, I have a very different approach to therapy. I go with the very direct questions, right? Like I go with a very direct approach of hey, these are all surface level things. What's really going on, right? Like tell me the deeper issue.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Be very nice. A month into it, you're like, oh, something, I was wasted a month of being nice.
Exactly. I learned that professionally a long time ago because I was taught to go with a nice route, because that's how you're taught to you're supporting your client, right? Like you're supporting your patient. You're trying to get them to that place where they feel comfortable and confident to open up to you. And then I'm like, I see you every week and we talk about the same thing, right? So I'm like, let's go directly to what's happening. There's something that brought you here, right? Rather than beating around the bush, let's talk about what it is, right? So that way we can get you the support that you need faster, right? And support that you need right away so that you're not continuing to face this on a daily basis, right? Because within that month, the damage increases, right? The severity of the situation increases. It gets worse and worse. And sometimes that's hard to come back from. So it's better to almost take that direct approach and say, it's starting to sound like these are all symptoms. Let's talk about the illness, right? Like, let's talk about what's really happening. Tell me about this part of your life and that part of your life and how it is and how you would rate it and all of that. And then you really do see those, major markers of the issues at hand. And with intimacy, intimacy is so broad, right? It's not just the physical intimacy. It's about connection, right? How do you connect with me? How do you feel about me? How do you see me? Do you see me, right? Do I exist? All of these communication pieces, right? Are you looking at me when you're talking to me? Are you making eye contact? Am I a priority in your life, right? Are my needs a priority to you? Do they matter? All of these questions come up for people, and sometimes it's hard to say it out loud, but these are things that are happening in our head, right? These are questions that are brewing. So it's important for us to be able to feel comfortable because this is our spouse after all, right? Somebody who we share our whole life with, our time with, and all of that. So why shouldn't we be able to just be like, hey, this is not happening. This is not good. I'm not happy, or I'm struggling in this relationship, right? And this is why. Let's talk about it. Tell me, right? There has to be a friendship there. There has to be a connection there for that person to feel confident and comfortable to be able to share that with you. So, and that comes with, building that relationship and getting there with, for the couple to get there. And that doesn't happen unless they know who you are, right? That doesn't happen if they don't know the real part of you. And if they just know that surface level version of you. So focusing more on how well do you guys know each other, right? Why has it taken this long for the two of you to talk about this? What's kept you from connecting with each other in this way? What can you do? What would you like to have? Or how would you like to change this relationship or improve it so that it is what you want? So really helping them answer those key questions that are keeping them from right away saying, hey, our issue is intimacy or our issue is X, Y, and Z.
Do you see your experience intimacy issues, or do you see that the intimacy issues are a symptom of something?
They're a symptom of something different. Yeah, because usually there's one major thing happening within the couple that's causing their relationship to fall into chaos. So I try to identify what that one thing is, because a lot of times a couple will come in and just be like, oh, my husband and I, we don't talk anymore. I'm like, okay, why not? Do you guys live in the same house? Do you have phones? Email? Why aren't you talking? Then, oh, he doesn't like talking to me. Did he say that? Or did you just assume that, right? And then I'm like, hold on. let's talk a little bit more about other stuff. So we'll go into like their history, right? We'll talk about, well, what happened, right? Like you've been married for 20 years. This is the first time you're coming to therapy. What finally, made you want to do this, right? And then, you try to like get them to like say that this is it, this is why, this is what's causing that chaos in our relationship, which is then, impacting our intimacy, impacting our connection, our time, our understanding of who we are. And then you come up with that. But again, everyone's different. So for some, this approach works really well. For others, they're like, we'll never see you again. And that's perfectly fine too, because everyone's different. So we allow that. You have to have that space where it's like, it's okay. Like, everyone's gonna feel differently about how you talk to them. But majority of the time, people actually like this approach because they're like, you didn't waste my time. And I'm like, okay, good. My goal was to not waste your time. So it works out.
Okay, sure. Well, there was a response to the question earlier that sometimes it's not about giving words power. You can avoid it to a certain extent, but one can't hear a negative comment all the time. It sounds from the response that it's not just negativity, maybe there's some defensiveness. Sometimes people use words as a way of control. What does a person do in that situation?
Well, I think it's not so much about not giving the words power, but understanding your own strength to be able to hear it, right? Like, again, why is this striking a chord, right? I can understand if it's something that you're being put down or you're being felt to like, feel less than. But if that's the case, what's keeping you from saying, hey, stop, don't do it. I don't appreciate that. You need to stop right here, right? Or, you know what? I can't have this conversation with you at this moment, so I'm gonna leave and I'll come back when you're ready to have a conversation without name calling or blaming or putting me down, whatever the case may be. Because a lot of times just setting that boundary right there, right? Putting your foot down and saying, I'm not taking this from you, helps you as the individual to gain that power back, right? And to not let the words hold all the power. Because words do hurt, right? They do make us feel a certain type of way. They certainly do make us feel like, question ourselves. Because, we start thinking, am I really like this? Do I really present like this? All of that. So it happens. But you have the ability to say, I don't want to listen to this anymore, right? So I'm going to stop you right there. And when you're ready to have a respectful conversation, we'll continue. So you have the power to put the foot down and say, no thanks, not taking it.
That kind of reminds us of that famous saying that don't go to bed angry. So there are a lot of people that have this policy that whatever the conflict is, they're going to resolve it and then go to sleep. But I know that there are some individuals where that can lead to more conflict because of their heightened emotions. What do you recommend?
Well, it's good to not go to bed angry, right? Because now you're in the same space as your spouse, the person that you've just had this heated conversation with, and you're just like, thinking all the negative things you can in your head about them. So you don't want to put yourself in that space, right? You certainly don't want to go to sleep because guaranteed you're not going to have a restful sleep. You're going to wake up feeling very tired and exhausted. So it's not going to be worth it, right? How do you resolve conflict that sometimes just can't or doesn't seem that it can be resolved? It's like, there are things like that. What do? You got to take care of yourself, right? You got to remind yourself that like, hey, I'm not in control of how this other person's feeling right now, right? Yes, I've contributed 100%. Yes, I've said things tonight that I shouldn't have said. Have I acknowledged that openly, right? Have I said, hey, I'm sorry for saying these things? Have I been able to take ownership, right? And say, that wasn't cool, right? I should backtrack, or I was angry, or I was motivated by my, negative thinking pattern, and therefore this is how I'm responding. Nobody talks like that, by the way. But like, people do, but when you become self-aware, you will say, that wasn't okay, and I'm sorry about that. So you find a way to ease yourself, to make yourself feel better, in the sense you soothe yourself, knowing that you've acknowledged your fault openly to your partner, and then allow them to figure out what they want to do with that, because you can't control how they respond.
So I have a question about communicating unmet needs. There are a lot of people that struggle because, it's a form of criticism. Because even if they don't say, well, you aren't doing this right, when you say that, well, I'm not getting enough of X, that means you're not providing enough of X. So for some people, it might be affection, others, it might be attention, it might be appreciation. How can you communicate something that you need without your partner being defensive and taking it as a criticism?
I think it's the approach that matters, right? Like, it's how you talk about it, kind of like the tone that you use, right? Or you approach your partner with compassion, right? Like with empathy, with like how you'd want to be,
Doesn't it only come up when they're like frustrated?
Yeah.
Usually people hold it in.
But then, for most of you, you might know this saying, and for others, you are probably too young to know this, but it's like, check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? So, like, I literally use this in my office. If I could put it up on a wall, I probably would. Because, like, you gotta check yourself in these situations, right? You gotta say, well, one, am I just doing this right now because like I'm mad and I want to like, poke, right? Am I doing this on purpose? Am I really feeling this way that my needs are not being met? Or is this something that I could just come up with and be like, boom, in your face? Like, you get this jab and that jab. So we really have to think about where our feelings and thoughts are coming from, right? When we're arguing. 9 out of 10 times when we're angry and we're saying things, we don't mean them, right? But we're doing it because we're like on a defense mode, and we're like, I will show you who I am. And here's my army of all my defense mechanisms, and they're ready and charged to come right at you, right? So you're not gonna hurt me, buddy, I'm gonna hurt you. And when we do that, it doesn't end well, right? So you gotta check yourself, and you gotta be like, are these things true? Is it really real? And you're gonna get the response that they're not, right? Because you know that if your needs were not being met, at least maybe not, at all, right? Things would have been a lot worse. But maybe they're being met, but not to your standards, right? To what you would like or how you would like. But have you communicated that and said, hey, I appreciate you doing X, Y, and Z, but I would like you to do more of A, B, C. Right? And when you do that, you're really telling your partner what it is that you really want, and not necessarily using that against them when you're angry at them, because that's just ammo.
Earlier, you asked us to reflect on our, parents' communication and whatnot. So one thing that reminded me of is a lot of times, of course, we model what our parents say or how they react, but I think one of the things as I get older I notice is that their pattern of communicating with each other is modeled on a culture that's not necessarily our culture. So maybe we, in our teens and our early 20s, we go through a pattern of rejecting what we see. And as we get older, we realize, okay, they were really right, or they are right, we just don't like the way they said it. And I wonder how that plays in what you experience with people's communication issues. In other words, we talked about divorce, is another problem. Is it that perhaps we are modeling a pattern a pattern of communication that is based on a cultural norm that's not our cultural norm growing up here? And is that potentially part of the tension? Or can you sort of bifurcate the pattern of communication with the culture that informs it? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, certainly, they both play a part. Who you are today, right, and who you were brought up as, right? These are two different versions of yourself. And at times when we're not understanding or being aware of these two different parts of who we are, we tend to like literally be in internal conflict with them. So we're being pulled in different directions, right? So as like, you know, let's say a Muslim female Pakistani, the cultural expectation is that I know how to make my roti round, right? Like my bread. And if I don't meet it, then maybe I'm not living up to the standards of you know, what my mom is, who's like an amazing, you know, cook. Like I think about her food and water comes in my mouth. But like, you know, so really saying like, whose expectations am I really trying to meet here, right? My cultural expectations of who I am or who I'm becoming every day as an individual. And when we kind of have an awareness, then we don't have that conflict that drives us to respond and react the way that we do in situations. Because we've understood that the place where this is coming from is a place of like, you know, understanding that I'm acting this way because I feel that way, right? Or this is who I am, and therefore it's, you know, allowing me or like, you know, kind of being the driver or motivation to how I respond in these situations. So there's usually a conflict because something happens to us when we get married. I don't know what it is, it's like a switch. That one day when we're totally Western, right? Like we'll work, we'll go out, we'll go on date nights, we'll like do this and that and blah, blah, blah. You get married 6 months later, it's like, where's my dinner? Like, you know, I've been home for 45 minutes and there's no food on the table. And it's like, huh? Like what happened? We weren't like this, right? So there's a shift that comes in, which is a cultural shift, right? That somehow, somewhere, we now expect these things from our partners that one, we never addressed before, right? Two, are really driven by cultural norms, right? Things that we've seen other people do and how other people have their lives, right? Or what we think they have their lives as. So now we think that this is the cultural norm and this is who we need to become. So that's a huge driver. But that's also because we're in conflict. We don't really know if that's really who we are or that's just like a part of us that's trying to like sneak in and show us that like, oh, this is still you. So self-awareness is a huge piece in like, you know, marital counseling. Like I work with my clients to really like figure out who you are as an individual, who you are as a spouse, right, as a partner, and then who you are as a unit. Like if there's children involved, if you have a family, because all those people, they're different. Their expectations are different, their roles are different, they're driven and motivated by different things, but they're all one person. So we need to be able to identify these different parts of ourselves so that when we communicate with each other about anything, we can ask ourselves we can say to ourselves, like, we know where this is coming from. I hope that makes sense.
Well, speaking of culture, no one has mentioned in-laws. How do you navigate in-laws and expectations and the commentary that comes along with having in-laws?
Oh, that's a fun one. I know. Isn't it time for a song or something? All right, so in-laws, you know, it's a sensitive topic. And usually, you know, I try to like tread lightly on this topic because I don't want to get in trouble. But I'll also say that, in my opinion, this is personal and professional, that it's important to treat your in-laws, you know, with the respect that you would give to your own parents, right? Because they are your spouse's parents, right? They have been with your spouse for all those years, right? From the moment that your spouse was born until, you know, whatever age they are now. So therefore, they have that, you know, right over them in that way, right? Not to say that they can intervene or interfere or give you ideas or come and redecorate your house or like whatever. No, those are all side things. But the respect that they deserve ultimately is like, they're his parents, right? They're we're always his number one or her number one, and therefore they should always be, viewed as that. You just came into his or her life, right? So you're new. You don't get to say, oh, pick me, choose me, right? Leave them. Because that's not fair to them, right? That's not fair to the in-laws. That's not fair to the family. Because that also creates a lot of chaos in a relationship, because then like each person feels like, well, I'm like caught between two people, like, or two ends, and where do I go? So to answer it in a short way, always give those parents like, respect, right? If they're saying things that are out of line or disrespectful or, stepping in spaces where they should not be, right? That's different. That's where you can set boundaries, right? And be firm with not only them, but also with your spouse and say, hey, this is not okay, right? Like there has to be that understanding of like, we should not allow, they should not feel like they can just walk in and expect that everything will be however they want, but rather it's a conversation that we can have. Or let's not create problems, right, where problems aren't needed. And it's not about us versus them or like, me against you. It's not about that. It's more about just finding a way to communicate where they understand what your expectations are and they respect that, which is hard because I know there's always like that like emotional need to like kind of like do the, what's it called, like the tug of war. So, but it's not good for the people in the between who are being pulled in two different directions, because it really does create a lot of chaos within a relationship. So just respectfully being mindful and just kind of like setting the right boundaries.
So this is kind of unrelated to what you were talking about. So I'm not married, but I just have a question in terms of how to really tease apart if somebody's telling the truth with how they kind of, like who they are, like if they introspect, if they reflect, because I feel like most people can say, oh, I want to become better, I want to strive, to learn about Islam, but how do you really tease apart if they really want to do it? Because there are different levels, because I don't want it to fade away, and it might fade away, but like I want to find somebody who actually means it like deeply and not just kind of says it superficially, because really everyone, like I feel like, is going to say that they communicate well or they, are good Muslims.
Yeah. Action speaks louder than words sometimes, right? So really seeing what they're putting out there in terms of who they are.
Would you say to like, it would be important to put yourself in situations that test their behavior?
No.
So
Testing in any relationship never helps, guys. Like never, right? Like I don't know about you guys, but I suck at taking tests. Okay, so I will always score low or fail, because what does a test do, right? It creates a mindset of pressure, right? It puts a spotlight on you, right? And we're people, we're human, we're gonna mess up. We're bound to make mistakes, right? And when you're looking for someone, you're not looking for them to trip up and make the mistake. You're really looking to see like, well, when they did make the mistake, how did they come back from it, right? Like, did they even acknowledge that they made a mistake? Did they even say like, I want to become a better person, but I'm struggling, right? There's a lot of stuff that holds me back. I want to be able to work through that. Like, and this is what my plan is, right? And this is what I'm doing right now in action to like show you that I'm doing it. But testing them, it's like, oh, I'm going to put you on the hot seat, like, and I'm going to see how you do. And if you fail,
but like they wouldn't know.
Even then.
Yeah, because I just think that it's just so hard to tease apart, like if they really mean it or not.
The thing is, we never really know. Huh? You have a side question on that?
Well, since the question is about men, so
Yeah.
I'll jump in. You can learn a lot about someone from their friends, right? So it's easy to be like, well, I'm really spiritual, right? What's the guy's name? DJ Khaled, right? He was asked, because, he's Muslim-ish. And so people asked him the question, they're like, do you pray? right? Because Muslims pray 5 times a day. And he said, I pray more than 1,000 times a day, right? And so, like, you know, there are more than 1,000 memes that have come out of that. And, you know, we assume the best about everyone. But my point in mentioning that is that a person can say anything they want about themselves. And in this case, I mean, spirituality and thoughtfulness is not what we've observed, right? And so when you look at a person as a prospect for marriage, look at, you know, I get people all the time that contact me and they're like, can you be my reference as a rishta, like for marriage? And it's really hard for me to say no because there's like every cell in my body is programmed to say yes to everyone in the masjid. But sometimes I have to say no because I literally have to say to their face, I say, I don't know you. How can I be a character reference for you? And of course I'm like, but there's an opportunity. I'm here every day. Come to the masjid. Let's spend more time to each other. Give me 2 or 3 weeks and I'll be happy to do so. And sometimes they take me up on that and sometimes they don't. But if you meet someone that has a reference with their imam, that means something. Because that's not a relationship that you can cook up overnight, right? And similarly, if you look at the person's friends, their family relationships, those are things that they've cultivated over a very long period of time. And that's going to speak to how authentic they are. Because men sometimes can be, they can be very good at presenting, right? Because they're like, okay, well, this person's religious, so I need to be religious. So, you know, let me break out the alhamdulillah, mashallah. You know, suddenly the ha becomes a ha, right? And yes.
I mean, I think that's what's important about the engagement period is that the whole point is you can fake it for only so long. But if you have to like come over for dinner, you know, for several months in a row, or if you guys go out with your parents or siblings or something like that several times in a row, you can start to pick up, is the person stingy? Are they not? You know, as I was saying in the khutbah on Friday, a stingy, or 2 weeks ago, a stingy person is stingy with everything, not just with money. They're stingy with their emotions, with how they deal with people, their perspective. So the point of, or one of the wisdoms of the engagement period is that we can tease those things out. So rather than look at it like, I'm going to test, because I agree, I would fail if I knew that, I mean, and I'm sure I have failed. My wife put me through all these tests, but hopefully, inshallah, there's a consistency that you can't fake. So rather than go through the test model, I would advise people, and you know, please chime in, that to use the engagement period to seek out those qualities that you're concerned with. In the pre-modern world, there was something called firasa, and firasa was you could look at a woman's face or you could look at a man's face and hands and know everything about them. So traditionally, you know, your mom would go, or your sister, or your grandmother, or your aunt or something, and because, you know, there wasn't free mixing, and she would see the woman, and she would be able, just by seeing the woman's face and her eyebrows and her hands, she would know what she's like, and vice versa. Of course, now we have, everything's artificial, so we can't do that anymore. But the idea behind that is that you need to know those things. You need to know what the guy is like. So you have to, but not test him like in the Western way, so like I caught you and exposed, not like that, but you test him by just the passage of time. Is he consistent? His friends, so on and so forth. That's one thing I would highlight. How much time? Well, I mean, you know, I would say at least a few months, because it's impossible to fake it for that long. I mean, I agree with Imam Rafai. Men are very good at faking it, but when it comes to these things, but there's only so long you can fake it. And by using his friends, is it always, he's always coming to you, or are you going over to their house? Have you met his family or his friends, or is it only, if it's always to you, like I had a guy that came to my sister-in-law, and after a while it was just very sketchy. And then it turned out that like everything about him was false, and he was like sleeping in his car, and he didn't have a family, and it was just like everything he was saying was opposite from what we were seeing, but because he was not able to fake it for so long. And I remember, I wasn't directly involved in that, but something that I observed. So I would say at least a few months.
Less what?
less people on how the person is treating people with less affluence,
Yeah.
like the behavior toward people who are not that affluent.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that that makes a huge difference, like how they treat other people, how they talk to other people, you know, their character comes out, right? Like, are they giving? Are they caring? Are they compassionate, right? Are they willing to help out if they see someone is in need of help, right? Are they open to that? These are all qualities that we do want to look out for, right? Because this is the person that you would hope would then help you in the future if you ever needed it, right? In terms of in any part of your life. So their character, you know, like everyone's saying that you can only fake it for so long, right? So it's not about testing, it's not about interrogation, it's not about the 101 questions to get you on the path of marriage. It's about really observing, right? How is this person? Like, how does he interact with the people around him? You know, when I go to his house to visit his family, how do they interact with each other, right? Are they close? Are they cold? Are they like warm? Like, how do they, you know, do all these things? And sometimes, right, people are really good at putting on a show. And so it, you know, that kind of like that caution is like in your head. And the thing is, over time, right, people will constantly show you a different part of who they are, right? And you have to be open to accepting that, right? There's no constant forever. There's no like, oh, this person's great today, he's gonna be great forever, right? Because that will change. So being open to and being flexible with that is important. So that way you can find, you know, how do you deal with those issues as they come up?
Because like I feel like when people go on shows like family, like your parents might think they're really good, and then you might see these signs over time, but then your parents are like, oh, he's fine, he's fine. And you have to like navigate that, which I think is not tricky, but I guess you kind of need to like trust yourself and you're making that decision based on what you've seen.
Yeah. Definitely providing the right argument, right? Like to your parents and saying like, you know, I see what you're seeing, but I'm also seeing this, right? So maybe I might need you to be a little bit more extra observant and try and see what I'm seeing, right? And let me know if like I'm seeing it differently or wrong, you know, get their opinion on that. So, and then for that to happen, there has to be like an open communication in the family, right? About accepting one another's opinion, about valuing their children's opinion, right? What their thoughts are. So listening to them and saying like, you know, like I trust your judgment, you know, and I can still provide you feedback and guidance, but obviously you're seeing something we're not, so we're gonna like work together and figure it out and go from there.
So we're getting close to Maghrib, so I'm going to combine a couple of questions together. So one was saying about having a larger family where everyone is supported and loved, given space, and bring in in-laws and new relations. So they're talking about merging the families together. And then another question about expectations about serving relatives or serving parents. So, I mean, what's the model? Is there a right model, or is it cultural based about like, you know, is the family the nuclear family? Is it a larger circle? What do you recommend?
Well, I think it depends on the couple, right? And like what they both believe. Because, you know, for one, it could be just a nuclear family, right? And for others, it's like, well, this is my family, right? Like these are all the people I've known forever. And you just popped in the picture yesterday, right? So you're now part of the family. So really talking about why those people are important and like why it's important for you to have them in your life, right? Not why it's important for your spouse to fit into their life, right? Because that's on your spouse. If they want to fit into their life, great, right? But if they feel like they can't fit into their life for whatever reason, because it's too much, maybe they've had a negative experience of themselves, like growing up in a joint family system or whatever the case may be, so they're kind of like weary of it, accept that, right? Like I understand your fears and concerns, like I get what you mean, but I would like for you to give this a try, right? And see that how maybe my family's different, right? And then give that space to that person to grow into it. But not expect that like just because you married this person, automatically they're gonna become a carbon copy of you, right? And they're gonna just like fit perfectly into your family as if they were like a piece of a puzzle. Because it doesn't happen, they're a whole different person, right? With all
That's
their
also
own
a problem
experience.
because, I mean, you have your whole life and then you want that person to just fit into your life,
yeah.
but then that person also has their whole life And then if they think that, so then now how do the two lives merge everything together if they don't leave each other enough space?
Yep. And that's difficult, right? Because like we have this like fantasy view in our head that like, you know, these two families coming together, everyone's in coordinated outfits and everyone loves each other and like we're gonna be happy forever and it's gonna be like a song and dance.
That's our nikah speech. Don't mess with that.
It doesn't work that way, right? Because you're combining so many different personalities, right? So many different views of life and so many different ways of like understanding each other. You might not like what your great aunt said to your cousin, right? What do? Right? How do you deal with that? Do you like get in the middle and take one side or the other, or do you stay like Switzerland and be like, I'm neutral, like we're all good here, right? So those dynamics, they have to be discussed because they need to be discussed, like why these things are important to us, why these people are important to us, right? So you go through like the family map and you say, hey, these are the important people in my life, right? And the reason they're important, right? You share that, why? And then you allow that person to be like, okay, I see why these people, this part of your family is important to you and why you want them to be a part of our family.
What about communication after having children? I'm asking for a friend, right? You know, this is a common refrain, especially from husbands, that their wife is just like, you know, super mom. She's so attentive to everything that the kids need. In most cases, has her own career, but it's established, you know. But then, you know, then the husband's like, well, what about little old me, you know? And doesn't know how to express that he needs more attention. And of course, his wife probably feels overwhelmed. It seems selfish. Or why does he feel like he needs to compete with the kids? How does a couple navigate that as a unit?
Well, I think like the best part is the 9 months prior to having kids, as well as the time before you started planning having kids, like what life may look like, you know, discussing it and really seeing like, you know, what could potentially happen, right? Again, we stay away from the rainbows and butterflies and everything will be great because everything won't. Your life turns, you know, and changes, does the 180. So what will you need from me, right? When I become a mother? What will you need from me when I become a father, right? Meeting each other's expectations, understanding each other's expectations, and then seeing if they can be met. And those expectations might change because of complications in the pregnancy, right? Things that you weren't expecting. Complications in health after delivering. Maybe that wasn't something that was planned or expected. What do? How do you show up for the other person? You ask, what can I do for you? Or you look tired. Like, give me the baby, you go rest, right? We tend to be like me, right? Or it, in the sense like the baby. No, it's about us, right? If one partner is ill or unwell in the family, it affects the whole system, right? It doesn't matter which one it is. It doesn't matter if it's the mom or the dad. If one person's not well, it will affect your entire system. If the baby's sick, it will affect your entire system. So don't focus on like, you know, how do I ask for more, right? Ask if what I'm asking is it something that I'm also giving, right? Am I giving my wife the attention she needs since she's given birth? Have I asked her, hey, do you need a night off so you can get a full 8 hours and I'll watch the baby, right? Did I give her that attention? If I didn't, then why do I feel the right to ask for it, you know? So it has to be like a reciprocal thing where things are being given and taken, right? Because that's how a relationship works. It's like a transaction, but a good transaction, not like a, you know, a negative one.
And when affection and intimacy are involved, you know, in the giving, there's actually receiving.
Yep.
And in receiving, there's an aspect of giving.
Yep.
So this takes us full circle. We're approaching the Maghrib time. You know, you've told us about the ingredients, the causes. You know, can you give us some takeaway practical techniques? You know, how can we improve our communication? For those that aren't married, it's the same techniques with all relationships pretty much. I mean, how can we improve? What are things that we can do? You know, a common thing that, when things get, when we're counseling couples and things get heated, and I make the simple suggestion, why don't you guys hold each other's hands and tell us how you really feel? And immediately it diffuses the situation. But of course, people at home, they don't do that because they're mad, right? So what are things that people can do, practically take with them?
I think the most practical thing would be to build a relationship with yourself, right? Learn about you. When you start, that's like the most important relationship you'll have, right? Because from that relationship, you will expand on all of your other relationships. So if your communication with yourself is good, like where you understand yourself, where you understand who you are, what it is that you want, right, and need, and can look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, you look good today, or hey, good job, on that report card or whatever. You can give yourself positive feedback. Those relationships around you will work out so much better, right? Because now you're giving, so you can also give out, right? So build a positive relationship with yourself, and then the relationships around you will come together. Yeah.
Wait, I'm talking about 30-something years of marriage, and you finally learning about yourself and you evolving, and you don't want to be the person you've been cultured to be, and it does not align in the way you think, or just life is different now, and you're getting a lot of resistance from your spouse at this point. And you've tried everything. When do you throw the towel and say, I can't do this anymore? What advice would you give this person?
I would say that has this person asked a question to their spouse as to why they're being so resistant? And have they gotten like a very clear answer, right? Because there's something happening with the spouse who is feeling uncomfortable, right, with this new change, right? Because they were accustomed to this version of their spouse for 30 years. And now all of a sudden there's a brand new version. They're like, what do I do? How do I fit in? Yeah. Exactly. Where do I belong here? And if we haven't had that conversation yet, right, and if we haven't even acknowledged their fear, then we're never going to get past, and we're always going to feel like we're in this conflict. And then it's easier in the mind to throw in the towel and just be like, I'm done with this. I can't handle this. This person doesn't care, right? Or we can be like, well, what could be causing this person to respond the way that they are, right? Or how would I respond if the tables were turned, right? What would I do? What would I be feeling? And then take that approach and go talk to your person.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming here. And thank you, everyone online. Oh, did you have a question? Sorry. Quickly. Yeah.
Risa made me come here.
My wife made me do it.
Yeah, my wife made me do it. One thing we realized with Risa and I, she doesn't like my sarcasm. So how do I fix it? It's part of who I am. This is how I speak, but I don't want to be on the mic. Okay. So yeah, basically just sarcasm of it. Now she realizes it's not funny. I'm like, well, it's funny, but she doesn't find it funny. I'm struggling with that.
Isn't your wife a clinical psychologist?
Well, that's true.
I'm just playing. Well, I think, ask yourself what you think it is that she doesn't find funny, right? Is it like comments about people or things that you say or remarks that you make? Are they fall in a certain category? And if that's the case, then you steer clear of that. And you continue with the humor, but you just avoid making those type of jokes that she might not feel good about, right? All right. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, everyone, for coming and being here. I appreciate it.